Here to cover all things crime, history, and politics, we are at the desk. I'm your host, Alex McDonald, and in today's episode, the politics panel will discuss the U.S. healthcare system, we'll explore the history of tariffs, and the history panel will discuss some of the most well-known explorers and their stories. Now, come take a seat with us at the desk. Welcome back to At the Desk. First, it's time to send it over to the politics panel to discuss the current administration's healthcare policies plans. Over to you, Jordan.
Thanks, Alex. President Trump's current healthcare plans focus on expanding private Medicare plans and cutting federal health spending. He supports cutting regulations and aims to roll back Biden-era policies, including those related to drug pricing and gender-affirming care. Critics argue these changes favor private insurance while threatening public health funding and research. So let's kind of dive into that. Healthcare right now, it's always been a big thing. It's always an important part of any administration. What are your guys' thoughts? Ryan, we'll start with you.
Right now, it seems like the main goal of the Trump admin is to cut Medicaid, Medicare, just like they've been doing to most other, or for a lot of other programs. Some cases they're already doing it. They're cutting research funding for cancer research. Really, their cuts to Medicaid or Medicare, if they do happen, will have an effect on millions of people. Even if they only cut 5%, I think is what I saw. But a lot of people would be affected by it. And I think they're kind of holding off on doing it for now because they're afraid of the blowback, especially considering all the protests that have been happening last weekend. But I think that's their ultimate plan.
Yeah, well, around 35 to 36% of Americans are reliant on government health care, as the other 65% are private, and around 53% of the 65% are insured with their employer. So it's a pretty good split up of private and public health care. I think the main concern right now with Obamacare is that the promise, or at least of the Affordable Care Act, and what happened there was that the promise was to lower the price, and that just simply didn't happen. So there's a lot of frustration on the Republican side with that particular policy. But then again, Republicans haven't really offered a good solution to, like a better alternative to Obamacare, and that's where this issue kind of lies, is where what's going to happen once these programs are cut, and that's where there's that hesitancy. So I would recommend to the GOP to come up with something better or leave it alone for right now.
Yeah, that was where John McCain kind of, went off on the wrong foot with the Republican Party. Was I'm not supporting abolishing the Affordable Care Act just because I feel like there's no proper replacement. And the Affordable Care Act does a lot of interesting things, like once you hit a certain amount of employees in your company, you're required to offer some sort of health care or pay a fine to the government, and where health care will be taken care of. So it offers a lot of protections, but it also has, as mentioned, disorganization. So it really has a lot of problems fitting the bipartisanship structure that we want it to, but it definitely has potential. And that's why I think McCain, he backed off, because he said at least it has potential, unlike the Republican option that Donald Trump claimed he had. He really didn't. And Vance has always said that Trump has kind of been a savior to the Affordable Care Act. He said that in the debate. Obviously, that's not true at all. He was adamant to try and kill it, for lack of better words. So obviously, we've seen some lying. But at the same time, Obama was certainly not perfect with it. Like, we are seeing that it increased the overall cost of healthcare and insurance in the private sector as well. So it certainly is something that I think Democrats and Republicans are on the wrong foot on right now. But I think the idea of it and the foundation was smart.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, really, it's just when they go through these cuts, or they're kind of these things, what they're really doing is they're affecting people, poor people, and old people.
Low-income families.
Low-income families. Sorry, poor people as well. Low-income families and old people. And old people, they're obviously the sickest, one of the sickest demographics. They benefit the most from Medicaid. And really, low-income families also do too. So it's really concerning because there's already problems with the healthcare system. You said that, as you just said.
Problems is an understatement.
Problems is an understatement, but the solution isn't what they've been doing with most other things, just tearing it all down buzzsaw style, leaving so much up in the air over what's actually happening. Unless they have an actual plan, which they don't put in place to try to even reform the act. It's not looking good right now.
And then the other question I'm sorry. Good.
Well, and actually, Jackson, I think you make a good point. Each year we're seeing those premiums going up, and like you're saying, it is getting more expensive even
Actually,
here.
up by 80% since the Affordable Care Act was passed.
And
yes.
even right now, we're seeing a 5% increase in payment rates for Medicare Advantage plans for the 2026 year. So you're right. Prices are going up, and of course, that's not making the American people happy. But then also sitting here saying maybe we cut it, move to a fully privatized system. Well, that's going to be expensive too. And like that's kind of where you come, what you were saying, where it's such a balancing act of there's really no great solution to this. Prices are going up. People aren't happy. You can't cut Medicare and Medicaid, but also what's a better solution? And I think that's the better use of our time. Instead of arguing, do we cut it, do we not? What's a way to move forward that's going to help people?
And then there's that other thing too. A lot of people are very frustrated with how the federal government has been put in the hot seat for every single citizen who's needed Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff. Then there's the question of, do we give states more power with healthcare? And we're kind of seeing that in, surprisingly, not California with Medi-Cal. And well, for lack of a better term, Medi-Cal in just about every single book you've read about healthcare is a total disaster. So that kind of throws that option away.
The general conservative outlook is private healthcare is better because if you have a bunch of companies competing, prices will go down due to competition. That being said, healthcare cannot be compared necessarily to other industries because it's something that's so needed. Like, would I call it a right? Necessarily no, but I would call it a necessity. It's something that people need. Anything can happen to anyone at any time. You get hit by a car, you could get cancer, anything like that, where you would need a healthcare plan. So I think we should look at it as more of a necessity as opposed to a business. But also, let's keep in mind the federal government has severely messed up with their healthcare system, since the Affordable Care Act, and even since Medicaid and Medicare were passed in the 60s.
And I agree with you that, healthcare, it's important for people to have that access. And one of the things I will say about this administration that if it works out, I would be happy to see is they're trying to be more transparent in those prices. Drug prices are expensive. Tests and scans, anything like that can be really expensive, and making it more transparent of not a range of maybe what it'll cost, but being more aware of here's what it's going to cost here. I mean, there was in one of the articles I was reading, one hospital and another hospital 30 minutes away from each other, the prices were about $1,000 different for the exact same test. And that's one of those things where it's like, if we could see that coming through too, that could also potentially help the American people.
It's just you go fully privatized. There's an issue where diabetes drugs were very expensive before Biden put a cap on how much you can charge for that. You go fully private, there is no reason for them to have a lower price. They will charge what they can charge, and a lot of people will not get those drugs because of that, and it's going to hurt people.
Well, and I guess that's the issue with privatizing the business is
a lot of people can't afford it.
People want big business. They want to make money. They want to earn money off of these things. And when it comes to stuff like healthcare, that's a difficult situation to be in because this is something that should be accessible to the American
we don't really
public.
know what it would look like though, because we've always had a lot of government intervention in healthcare since the 60s. So we don't really know for sure. It's all theoretical. It's all theoretical,
right?
yes.
I think a lot of people are understanding, and we're seeing it right now, so it's not really a theory anymore, is the big problem with we're seeing these duopolies and triopolies form in certain areas. We're seeing with energy, like energy departments where they're starting to regionalize. You take here, I'll take here. Cable companies are doing that too. Then we're seeing companies just start to gobble each other up and buy each other up. Like United Healthcare has gotten significantly bigger since it was when it first started. And that's something that we're seeing in every business. Do we want that in our healthcare business, which significantly affects poor people, rich people? People can get in a car accident at any moment, and then all of a sudden they're just screwed with bills because of this whole situation.
And that was expedited after the Affordable Care Act was passed, when these smaller private companies became big private companies, kind of took over the whole industry. And again, that's the majority of Americans.
Right,
That's 65%.
Unfortunately, the federal government always cites monopolies and duopolies at the end of the day as "quote unquote" more efficient, and it's very frustrating.
You go to private, and there's no way that these giant healthcare corporations have the best interest of people.
Of course not, their
They have
business.
marketing employees. Cigna has a marketing department.
Well, something I think is interesting is following these announcements of these rates going up and more money going into private insurers, you saw significant increases in those stock prices, people buying stocks in these companies. And it all just feels like a weird thing to be a part of healthcare and to profit off of that in such a way.
It's just if they cut this, I also heard they're going for Social Security in the same move too. If they do choose to do those cuts,
That brings in the question of Elon Musk. What everyone's been asking government these days: where does Elon Musk fall in this conversation?
Well, and actually, I think kind of shifting focus now into RFK and that influence there, and the HHS. Doge intervention and budget cuts I shouldn't say budget cuts, but they're trying to shrink that department. They're trying to quote unquote make it more efficient. And at this rate, they're approximately looking to let go 20,000 employees. And that was part of Doge and coming in and saying we want to take away money, we want to take away funding, we want to take away grants, and they're taking away employees as well.
It's just taking away this funding and even the employees. There's so much research that is so helpful to people because that is how we come up with things like the COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccine came out extremely quickly, and we have those, the scientists and those experts that people like to attack. We have them to thank for it. And now that you're cutting all of that, what happens if, God forbid, something similar arises, or there's another disease or an actual sickness? I mean, measles is going around right now. RFK's recently endorsed the measles vaccine, much to his fans' dismay.
And that's
Two
a
people died
concern.
already in South Plains of Texas.
And that's one of the concerns former and current HHS employees were saying. They are worried about this restructuring and taking away these professionals and these people that are very well versed in the world of health and medicine. What's that going to look like for the American public when they have less people qualified working in these positions?
And he has this whole rally against fluoride in water right now, which, listen, fluoride in water, there is some controversy around it. The only study they've shown recently where it's proved to be detrimental was only done in countries outside of the United States, where they doubled the amount of fluoride where we have in our water.
That's a whole separate issue. Yes. Well, fluoride is put in water to help dental issues from coming up.
Good.
Yes.
Decades of research has shown that it is beneficial for us and beneficial for our teeth. I mean, you can't overdo it, obviously, but wanting to flat out ban it or making a whole thing out of it
RFK
is
is
really
strongly
just
urging for states to stop
and
putting
Utah
fluoride in water.
already
Yes.
Yeah, well,
RFK just doesn't feel like a real issue.
Well, RFK's primary focus, I think, is to try to get the influence of big pharma out of the healthcare industry and the health industry. I see RFK actually more as of a health person as opposed to a healthcare person. He's focused on purifying the food again. The water thing is a little bit ridiculous.
He's a big ingredients guy.
He's a big ingredients
Yeah.
guy. It's not really healthcare. It's not healthcare.
He's
It's more
trying
about
to fight obesity. I mean,
Yes.
he's very big
which actually is the
on.
biggest killer in America as far as health goes. We have to
And
keep that in
well,
mind.
They
it's
just
a
took
good
off the-
platform to run on. I think so. And I know we've talked about this before whenever we were talking about who could potentially fill these spots. He's against those additives and preservatives. And there's things that he says that I do agree with. I think getting those additives and preservatives out of food is good. But also, he's very much focused on let's combat obesity. But some places he misses the mark.
They'll never do that, though. They'll never actually get additives or whatever, get rid of processed foods or whatever. There's just too much money there. The people in charge are too powerful. Do you think they're really going to let RFK?
Well, at that point, why do anything, though? Should we at least try to fight this? Because, again, in the United States right now...
They're not going to even try. That's the thing. They're not going to try. And you look at RFK, he's not really a healthy man himself. Does he look like a healthy man? Have you ever
seen a 70-something-year-old man, I'd say he looks relatively healthy.
Yeah, he looks very ripped for a 70-year-old man. And there are not many very ripped 70-year-old men that aren't on steroids.
So I'm sorry. What's the argument then?
What is the argument?
What are we arguing about?
I'm arguing that we should leave.
What are we arguing about?
Well, I think Ryan and I fundamentally agree.
What I was going to say, my original point is that what you were saying with obesity being the biggest killer in America, they just took away they killed the Biden plan that covered obesity drugs like Ozempic, which is basically a cure for obesity, and that we have.
We don't know the long-term
not a
effects.
cure, but
yeah,
we have.
I push Ozempic a lot. I would recommend more authentic ways of losing weight.
But I do think
obviously
something
endorse that, but they're if you really want people to be healthy, that should be an option for some people.
And I do think that's an interesting part of the conversation.
Hundreds of dollars for that.
And I think that's an interesting part of the conversation that came out today, where RFK is against those kinds of drugs like Ozempic. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing because he's, again, very much against obesity, and he is very much so doing it the natural way. But I also think the thing is, it's hard to sit in that position and tell all these American people what they should and shouldn't be doing. Everyone's journey is different. What works for some people works, what works for other people, and not giving them access to those medicines if they choose to have it and making it affordable. It just kind of seems to contradict his whole thing about wanting to fight obesity.
Yeah, but right now in the United States, junk food is way more affordable than healthy food, and that's kind of where the issue already is.
And yeah, that's also a big part of the problem.
Affordable anymore.
well, junk food is still more affordable than healthy food,
yeah.
though. So a person who is low income will still pick junk food a lot of times because of that.
I'm still lost. What are they arguing about?
I don't know if it's an argument.
What about the way to combat
obesity?
obesity?
I'll let you
It's not
figure
very
this out,
political,
though.
but still an important issue.
Yeah.
They've
Definitely.
been cutting regulations. That's the thing. Regulations for these medication testing, all that stuff. And those things are important. These regulations are important. They need these in place, or else people do get hurt as a result of error, lack of funding, lack of research.
Well, and I think that's the overarching thing that we're seeing here with healthcare. Regulations are getting repealed. Funding for grants and research is getting repealed. And that's where you wonder, where's healthcare going to go? Because with the lack of research and the lack of what we're seeing, that's a little bit scary in a world where I think at the end of the day, healthcare, as we've all agreed, is a very important thing, and having access to that research and knowing where to go from here. I mean, we're a very big country on technologically advancing, and by taking away that research, how are we going to do that?
And the reality, too, is the department has been cut by a quarter. We've already seen 10,000 people lose their jobs. We're probably going to see another 10,000 lose their jobs. But RFK told The Guardian that he thinks that 20% of the firings are going to be a mistake. So he is, in a way, beefing with Elon Musk. And he is also, in a way, a little bit concerned himself about his own department and the way that's being treated by the Trump administration, which I think is a concern that all Americans should have.
Absolutely.
I mean, do you think Musk is on his way out? He said he was on
Yes,
his
he
way
has
out.
to be.
He inevitably has to be on his way out. Acting as an officer of the United States, there is limitations and statutes towards how long he can act.
They don't really have an affinity.
That's what I was going to say. He's also, his title is also a patriot, and who knows what that means.
Yeah.
I definitely think healthcare right now, there's a lot of stress and anxiety around it for the American people. It'll be interesting to see where it goes, but that's all we have time for. It will definitely be interesting to see how the healthcare sector evolves under the Trump administration and the public's response to these changes. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Jordan. Stay tuned for an insight into the history of tariffs and how they have influenced the current tariffs in the U.S.
Thanks, Alex. Tariffs, defined as taxes on goods imported from other countries, have become a giant talking point in our country as of late, as a result of Donald Trump imposing them. In past speeches where Trump has talked about his plan for tariffs, he has mentioned former President William McKinley as an example of someone who was able to strengthen the American economy through imposing tariffs. Trump has previously referred to the time period where McKinley's tariffs were imposed as the wealthiest that there ever was. But was this period in American history really a golden age? Well, let's take a look back to the late 1800s and see how the tariffs imposed by McKinley impacted the American economy. William McKinley, who was the 25th President of the United States, was also the creator of the Tariff Act of 1890, commonly referred to as McKinley Tariff. See, in the late 19th century, the United States was in the middle of a rapid industrial and economic transformation, with the wide expansion of factories, steel mills, and railroads. Also during this time, McKinley was not the president, but an Ohio congressman. McKinley believed the best way to build up the U.S. economy was to protect it by keeping cheap foreign goods out. He believed that the more expensive a foreign product is, the more likely someone is to buy an American product. Doing this would allow American industries to grow and create more jobs. He put this belief into action by proposing the Act to Congress, and after 450 amendments, the law was passed. The Tariff Act of 1890 raised import duties to nearly 50%, up from the previous 38%. Things looked to be going well at first, with American factories making more product. According to business owners at the time, the act helped local industry and helped to build the economy. But while it benefited business owners, everyday Americans did not receive the same benefit. Everyday items such as clothing and sugar cost more, with the import versions being heavily taxed. The prices for U.S. manufactured items also increased because fewer competitions means that they could get away with higher prices. But those who were impacted the hardest turned out to be the farmers, as they not only paid more for manufactured goods, but foreign countries also placed high tariffs on American farm exports, making it harder for them to sell abroad. The frustration around the McKinley tariff could be felt just weeks after the tariff was imposed, with citizens voicing their frustrations in the voting booths. William McKinley ended up losing his seat in the House of Representatives, but we are well aware of this was not the end of McKinley's political career. By 1896, McKinley became the Republican nominee for president. He campaigned with the same belief about how tariffs were necessary to protect the U.S. economy. In his campaign, he argued that the Panic of 1893 was partly caused by Democrats' decision to cut tariffs after his law was repealed. Whether accurate or not, his argument proved to be convincing to American citizens, as McKinley won the election. McKinley's entrance into the Oval Office came at a time when the U.S. was in need of an economic resurgence. One way McKinley looked to accomplish a resurgence was through signing the Dingley Act, which pushed U.S. tariff rates to almost the same levels of the Tariff Act of 1890. It was, at the time, the highest tariff in American history. The economy ended up bouncing back from the Panic of 1893, with American exporting products more than ever before. By 1900, the U.S. became the world's largest industrial power, with McKinley using it as evidence that his tariffs were effective. However, despite economic triumphs during this time, there were still downsides. America was producing more than it could consume, and so to continue economic growth, they would need new buyers from outside the United States. But the problem was that some countries were still upset by the high tariffs that were previously placed on their goods and would not trade with the US unless they lower their tariffs. Yes, the very tool that helped the US grow financially ended up becoming a tool for stifling growth. This led to McKinley reconsidering his view on tariffs. McKinley had seen the problems that come with pushing tariffs too hard, such as him losing his seat in Congress as a result of the Tariff Act of 1890. New ideas were now emerging, such as reciprocity, where two countries agreed to lower tariffs for each other. In September 1901, he gave a speech where he argued for a new direction on trade, saying the era of exclusivity was a thing of the past. He no longer saw tariffs as an end-all be-all, but more as a tool. He would not be able to see the future plans come to fruition, however, as that would be the final speech he ever delivered before he unfortunately was assassinated the very next day. So that was the history of William McKinley's and tariffs, a specific example of the effect a presidential tariff can have on the United States. That's all for me. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Nikolai. Now it's time for the history panel as they talk about some famous explorers. Over to you, Shay.
Thanks, Alex. Travel has shaped civilization for centuries. From trade to food to language, many explorers have benefited from discovering the world around them. Others have exploited these resources, taking advantage of native populations through colonialism and slavery. Today, we take a look at some famous explorers and exploiters. When one of us names an explorer, the rest of us must guess their discovery from 3 options. So let's sail back in time and rediscover the past.
I'm so excited.
I was gonna pick Dora, but then I was told that was a bad idea and I shouldn't do it.
I also have that thought.
All right, guys, this is my guy. So take your guesses.
I'm gonna go with Florida.
I'm going to go with New Mexico because I feel like
Mexico.
that's what the picture
It's
is
a bit of a landscape that looks like that.
New Mexico?
I don't think it's Puerto Rico. I'm also going to go Florida.
Florida. Okay, well,
As if I'm
the
wrong.
men are right, unfortunately.
Oh.
Audrey, come on. Come on.
Whatever. I tried to use
Yeah,
context
well,
clues, but that's the
But
last time I do
yes.
that.
So Mustafa Azamori, he was also known as Esteban de Durantes or Estebanico, and he was a black man born in 1500 in Azamori, in a coastal city in Morocco. Now, he was enslaved, and he was sold to a man named Andres Durantes de Carranza, and this is when he started traveling, and he actually went to Cuba on a mission to conquer Florida for Spain. So I think it really raises like an interesting question because this is someone who is subject to so much brutality and now is also complicit in a way
Right.
in what's happening. And so like then he did travel to Texas. He spent a few years in jail, and after that he actually did travel to New Mexico, and that is where he ended up dying.
What was he in jail for?
I don't even know what he was in jail for. All I do know is that the Zuni tribe in 1539 killed him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. He went to
It's-
Cuba,
Yeah.
conquer Florida, or Spain.
Yeah.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that. Good for him.
Good for him.
Good for him.
Mhm.
May he rest in peace. Thank you for discovering the worst state.
Mhm.
That's pretty awesome.
At least you're not saying it's New Jersey.
My good friend Ernest Shackleton.
That's a good name.
It's a
It
great
is a great
name.
name for an explorer, is it not? Ernest Shackleton.
I hope it's the black bears one, but I don't think it is.
I have a theme with mine today.
I feel like a man with a middle part would not survive in Antarctica. Like his hair gel would just kind of freeze up there. So I'm not. It was definitely not that.
Okay.
Because you gotta like part it. It's very hard to part your hair.
It's
in
just true.
general.
That
I mean, Jamie and I both have little parts, but you know.
I'm
That's
gonna
gonna
say
make me
astronomer.
cry
I'm gonna say
laughing.
astronomer to discover Mars. He looks a little bougie. It's giving NASA.
Okay.
I'll
Well,
say
not
Antarctica.
NASA.
Antarctica. I'll give his middle part the benefit of the doubt.
I don't know,
And Jamie,
guys.
you're gonna go with
Antarctica.
Antarctica. It is Antarctica. Ernest Shackleton has a fascinating story of the indomitable human spirit, I must tell you. So he essentially was like, I want to be the first person to walk across Antarctica. And he was like, I don't care, but I'm going to do it. So he put out an ad in the paper, and a bunch of crazy people were like, yeah, let's do it. So they set off, they get to Antarctica. They are within seeing distance on their ship, the Endurance, which you can see
right there. Now, the Endurance was built by some of the finest naval ship makers in the world from Switzerland. It was very well made. It was a very nice ship. And then they got stuck because they couldn't land because of the ice. So like, all right, we'll wait out the thaw. It started to thaw, then the ice started to push up against its ship, and then they had to abandon ship. So then these guys, they got off the ship and they thought, okay, we'll just hang out on this ice patch because it's going to drift us towards Poland Island, which is where they had a cache of supplies. So they waited for the ice to drift them, and then it started to drift them the wrong way. So then these guys got onto their sailboats that they had brought with them on the Endurance because they packed them. They had dogs, tents, whatever. They had a lot of supplies. And then they sailed 500 miles to Poland Island. And then they got lost, couldn't get there, ended up on a place called Elephant Island, which, by the way, was a tundra wasteland. It was disgusting. And they were stranded there for about a month until Ernest, my man, Ernest Shackleton, said, you know what? I'm going to save the boys. He sailed on one boat with 5 other men, 800 miles to South Georgia on just a rowboat through one of the most dangerous parts of the ocean in the world. Landed there, climbed a mountain that other hikers have said was unclimbable, got to the seaport, and then was able to get a ship together to rescue his men. And nobody died. A guy had a heart attack. Another man had to get his foot cut off. None of them died. And Ernest Shackleton is one of my new favorite historical figures, especially because his ship was called the Endurance, and that, I believe, is what he
endured.
In a way.
You got it done.
He did
You got it done.
endure.
And his name was Ernest Shackleton. He lived to be 89.
Wow.
Earnestly
Gorgeous.
endured.
Hearty.
Earnestly endured.
Yeah.
Do you guys like my little tale?
Love it.
That was wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh.
This one's mine.
Vitus Bering.
Vitus.
Vitus
Yeah.
Bering. The Aleutian Islands, Hawaii, or New Zealand. I like Hawaii.
Oh.
I do. I like Hawaii.
You don't like Florida, but you like Hawaii.
Well, there are more reasons than.
Bering was Russian, right? So I'm trying to like geographically look at this. I'm gonna say the islands.
I'll say New Zealand, just to make things
Okay.
interesting.
All of these are islands.
Well, like Aleutian Islands.
Yeah. Well done, Shay. You sniffed it out. That's good.
Sniffed it out.
Vitus Bering was a Dutch-born explorer. However, he sailed under the Russian flag. He led an expedition in the mid 18th century, that explored the northwest coast of the North American continent. He mapped the coastline of Alaska and discovered the Aleutian Island chain, the Gulf of Alaska, as well as the existence of a strait that separated North America from Asia. Up until this expedition, people weren't really quite sure what was going on up there, but he was the first to map this part of the world. His voyages through this region were also very instrumental in establishing early Russian footholds in North America and led to the eventual Russian claim of Alaska before it was obviously purchased by the United States. The sea between the Kamchatka Peninsula and the Aleutian Island chain, as well as the 55-mile gap of ocean between Russia and Alaska, now bear his name.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, the Bering Sea and the Bering Strait.
There you go.
That makes sense.
So I wanted to not, say he discovered the Bering Strait because it seemed like a
Right. It's
little bit
pretty
obvious. but-
It's very interesting to me. I've always thought it was interesting how cartographers were able to create maps of places that were so accurate
Mhm.
before there was GPS or anything like that. I feel like that would be incredibly hard.
yeah,
Mhm.
no, it's certainly a lost art.
Yeah, definitely. It's
Yeah.
not something we have to do anymore, but it's fascinating.
No.
Mhm.
Shout out Bering. Good for him. I'm proud.
Oh, this one's mine.
Heinrich Schliemann.
Yeah. That's better than I would have pronounced that, so.
Oh, Timbuktu.
I'm
What I think-
guessing it wasn't the ancient city of Troy. Just I'm gonna go on a limb and say that.
Okay.
Do you think Timbuktu is a red herring? Could it actually be Timbuktu?
I mean, it's there.
I think the source of the Nile
Gotta
River
be
is just so specific that I'm gonna go with no. Why are you? Okay.
I'm looking at Heinrich, and I feel like he discovered Troy. Show me Troy. He was an archaeologist.
I'm gonna say A.
Especially now.
I'm gonna say B because
To split it up. So, Brandon's actually right. So he was obsessed
Wow.
with proving that Homer's The Iliad was based on real history. So he and collaborating him and Frank Calvert, who previously identified a site that they thought was Troy, went down to what is present-day Turkey
and excavated some of it. And they first used dynamite, which blew up multiple layers of these cities. So yeah, they found it, but also like in the process kind of destroyed a lot of it. Yay. And then he also discovered more in Mycenae.
Mycenae.
Yeah. And so he just focused on providing, tangible links to ancient texts. And while he laid the groundwork for now expeditions like this of trying to find myths, he also it warned people off of using dynamite.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I feel like that's
and
the last way I'd
excavation
try
techniques.
to excavate an ancient city. It's
Reduce
probably
the-
crumbling underneath my
Yep.
feet.
Okay,
Ancient city
example
to
of
rubble.
Blow it
exploiter,
up.
if you will. Yeah.
It could have been intact, and you would have never known.
All right, this is my guy, Stephen Bishop.
Steve Bishop.
Steve Bishop.
Wow. Death Valley, Mammoth Cave, Plymouth Rock. I'm gonna go with Plymouth Rock.
I'm
Okay.
gonna go with Mammoth Cave. I just think that's a cool name.
No.
I will also go with Mammoth Cave.
Well, I am just so glad Brandon was wrong this time because it is Mammoth Cave.
Wow.
So, Brandon, I know how you mentioned the maps, and that is going to be relevant here, so I'll come to that in just a second. But Stephen Bishop is an American cave explorer, but he's also a self-taught geologist, and he's known for being one of the first people to explore and map Mammoth Cave in the state of Kentucky. Now, Mammoth Cave has been recognized as the longest cave system in the world since 1972, and actually in 1842, Bishop drew a map of this cave from memory of the explored passageways of the cave, which was regarded as an authoritative map for 4 decades after that.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Mapping a cave has to be even harder.
I know he was
I have to
enslaved
say.
and worked as a
Yeah.
guide at Mammoth for approximately 19 years, but he was freed the year before his death, which is very
Good for
sad.
him.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Good for him.
hmm
Wow. Mammoth Cave. Truman Everett. This is mine.
Devil's Tower, Great Barrier Reef, or explored yellows.
Okay, again, as someone with glasses, I doubt a man with glasses was snorkeling down into the Great Barrier Reef. Just logistically, I mean, for me now, I feel like that would be a pain to do.
Yeah.
I don't think they invented contacts back then, so it's definitely not that.
Okay.
I'm gonna say,
I like your logic there.
yeah, just
following
the
it.
first thing I thought of, and the monocle glasses. Gosh, no. Devil's Tower.
I like the answer, Great Barrier Reef. I think that's fun, so I'm gonna say that.
I'll say Devil's Tower because I want to learn more. If that's
Yeah.
Well, you're all wrong. He actually
gosh.
explored
Whatever.
Yellowstone.
That's a tough
And this, as I said, there's a common theme with mine. Mine is fellows that have gotten themselves out of predicaments while exploring. And as we saw with our good friend Shackleton, he got himself out of a heck of a predicament. This one was even more impressive in my eyes. So this man, he used to be the Minister of Income in the Montana region, back when Montana was just a region, wasn't even a state. Abraham Lincoln appointed him to do that. And then Ulysses S. Grant was president and said, no, I want my guy to do it. So eventually, a couple of years later, our good friend here, he was like, well, I want to explore Montana. And there was an exploration group going. So he tagged along with them, basically. This man was described as a desk jockey. He had never had any outdoors experience. He was very coddled. He lived a very desk-like life, like he was just in the office all the time, So about a week or so into their travels, he gets separated from the group, walking through the forest, and then he got turned around and couldn't find their rendezvous point. So he got lost twice, basically. Got lost from the group and then got lost trying to get to the rendezvous point. So it was okay, though, because he had his horse, which had his tent, his supplies, whatever. He'd be able to ride back into town. Day 2, he's just trotting along trying to find everyone, and his horse with all of his materials runs off on him and just disappears into the woods. So now our good friend Everts is lost in the woods with nowhere to go, no horse, no food. So he starved for 4 days. Then he found this thistle, which is just a plant, and he started eating it to survive. And that ended up being what he survived on for most of these months. It's now renamed Everts Thistle, which is very fascinating to me. He actually ate a songbird because he didn't know how to make a fire. He was later able to make a fire because he found glasses, and he just magnified the sun into a torch, and then he would light that up, and then that's what he would cook with. One of these times, he lit the fire, and it got out of hand while he was sleeping, and he caused a forest fire and burned down half of a cliffside of trees, actually. He would talk to his hands and arms like he was gone for like a month by
He would
himself.
talk to his hands.
Those
and
he
Talk
claimed
to
that those were his
hands
friends.
and arms is crazy.
That was how he would converse.
Mhm.
So eventually, his party that was searching for him, they got home. They offered $500 to anyone that could find him. And then 2 prospectors were just out there and found him, and they described him as not human, but almost a bear. He was on the brink of death. When they got to him, turns out that his intestines were so screwed by eating the thistle that his intestines were blocked. And according to the legend, they fed him what was described as bear grease. Don't ask me what that
Wow.
is. They called it bear
Right.
grease.
I can take
And that
guess.
unclogged his
Excited.
intestines.
Oh.
And the story was national news. It caused the government to invest into surveying Yellowstone and getting a complete map of it, which eventually led it to becoming the first national park in history. And our good friend lived until he was 85 years old.
Well, speaking of being on the brink of death, we are on the brink of time. We have time for exactly one more. John Cabot. Whose is this one?
This is mine. Yeah.
Oh, that'll
Fire
make me
'em
laugh.
off.
That was a great transition.
Newfoundland. We go with.
ABC Islands.
I'll also go ABC Islands.
It was Newfoundland. Congratulations. So this is an
I'm good
English
today.
sailor. Yep. He was probably the first, if not one of the first, to from Europe to interact with the North American continent since the Vikings. Just a few years before Columbus arrived. Yeah, there you go.
Well, good for
All right.
him.
Well, that is all the time we have for today, and we hope you got to explore some of the past in the process. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Shay. Sadly, that's all the time we have for today. In the meantime, stay updated with all at the desk and at all our socials at PSU at the desk, and let us know what you want to see us cover next. I'm Alex, and we'll see you back at the desk next week.